meaning becomes power and truth becomes freedom. Tonight's guest is Phoenix Gould, a certified coach, expert on narcissism, and a radiant guide in turning emotional chaos into unshakable clarity. Her work empowers people to build a core that doesn't crumble in the storm. Whether you're battling narcissistic abuse or you're just ready to reclaim your self worth, this conversation is your spark. Welcome to the show, Phoenix.
Thank you so much, Anya. It's nice to be here.
So, let's begin at the root. What is narcissism really, and why is it so hard to recognize when we are in it?
Mm, yes. Well, narcissism, I will describe it in a way that narcissism is a personality disorder in which a person has a very limited capacity for empathy and for love. And so it affects their whole life. And the people around them are affected by it to a really large degree because they're being manipulated and gaslighted and abused, definitely in an emotional, a spiritual, and mental way, and at times also in a physical way.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, is there a subtle red flag people often miss early in relationships?
Yes, I think that one of the red flags that is really apparent in the beginning is called love bombing. And people often don't recognize it because it feels so good. Love bombing is when the narcissist makes you feel like you're the most wonderful person in the world, the most lovable and adorable person in the world, to where they give you a lot of attention, a lot of apparent love, and, really draw you in because this might be the first time in our lives to where we really feel cherished and adored in all ways and lovable in all ways. And some of us don't recognize that, especially when we have been raised by a narcissist, because when we have been raised by a narcissist, we have that deep lack of feeling loved. And here, when we start in a relationship, a romantic relationship with someone who's a narcissist, there is this first time where we feel, wow, this person really loves me and I start to feel really, really worthy. That is one of the red flags that we often miss because it feels so good and it doesn't show up as a negative thing. It feels so incredibly positive.
That's such a powerful distinction. It's not always loud or obvious, it's often hidden in charm and confusion.
Yes, exactly. And after the, when the love bombing phase is over, really is when the confusion that you mentioned starts. Because all of a sudden, there will be moments when the narcissist does not show that affection anymore, but starts very slowly to criticize us and to make us double, double guess, second guess ourselves. And this is when that subtle manipulation, goes even deeper to where we're so used to being so loved. And now there's this person who questions something we've done, who doesn't believe something, who makes us feel we've done something wrong, who criticizes us. But it happens so slowly that we don't really pick up on it, and we want to return back to that love that we felt from the person. So we try to figure out what it is we've done wrong so that we can get back to that blissful state of being adored and cherished. And that's when the confusion starts. It's like now it's not only good anymore. Now there are phases where we don't quite know what's going on.
Absolutely. So, you talk about building a core that cannot be shaken. What does that journey of radical self love actually look like?
Mm, yes. I do speak about that core because when we have grown up with a narcissist, we don't have a stable core. We don't have a stable self-esteem and a strong sense of worth. Or if, even if we have grown up in a healthy household, when we have been with a narcissist, they often destroy that core of self-worth. And so, yes, we can build for the first time if we've grown up in a narcissistic household, or rebuild it when we have been in a relationship with a narcissist. We can rebuild that core of, of self-trust, of self-esteem. And one of the ways that are really, really important is that we develop a relationship with ourselves that is based on radical and um, on radical self-love, which is that we start to have empathy and love for ourselves again. And so this journey starts from turning our attention from the outside back to the inside. Because when we grow up with a narcissist, or we have been in a relationship with a narcissist, oftentimes our sense of self-worth comes from the narcissist or from other people from the outside. So we are looking for affection and approval from others. Now, the journey starts if we realize that we cannot really find that self-esteem from the outside, that we have to find it inside of ourselves. And so we have to turn to ourselves for this approval. And this is where the radical self-love starts. Radical self-love is an unconditional love, because what we have experienced from the narcissist is conditional love. We are only loved when we do as they please, when we say what they want us to say, when we behave in the way that they want us to behave. That's later on in the relationship when we get that attention. And so unconditional love is that no matter what we do, what we say, how we behave, we're still loved. And, of course, as adults, we are really the only ones who can give that to ourselves, that unconditional love. And radical self-love is when we embrace and accept and have empathy for all parts of ourselves, which means, also for those negative emotions that we label negative, like sadness, confusion, overwhelm, anger, jealousy. And so there is a way that we can practice this unconditional love for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, what's one daily practice to begin strengthening that inner foundation?
Yes, there is a way, you know, a lot of people are afraid of emotions, but emotions really help us to connect with ourselves. And so let's say we're feeling anger, possibly towards a narcissist. A way to strengthen that connection and that radical self-love is to allow ourselves to feel the anger, and to know that, feeling anger does not hurt anyone. Acting on the feeling might hurt others, but just feeling it for ourselves never hurts anyone. And so we can start off by allowing ourselves to feel the anger, and also feel the extent of the anger, whether it's a lot or a little. And then if we can recognize in that moment that, the anger is just a part of us, like love and generosity as well, then we can start to embrace the anger as just a natural feeling that exists, that we don't have to fight. And so if we can get really curious about the anger and say, okay, what am I angry about? What is this anger about? What has been triggered? And we allow ourselves to feel the anger. We connect with the anger, and we try to understand why it is there. And then we go through a process where we can even visualize the part of ourselves that is angry in front of us. We can imagine that we speak to the part that is angry and say, "Oh, yeah, you're angry about this. Of course you are. It's really understandable that this makes you angry. That's okay. I am here for you. I accept and love you anyways. We're not going to act on the anger, but it's okay to feel this anger." If we can do that, then often comes an empathy for ourselves, for that part of us that feels that anger. And when we can just sit in that feeling of empathy, oftentimes that anger comes to a place of peace because it feels seen, it feels understood, which is really what, all feelings we have, all parts of ourselves that we carry just want to be seen and understood. And when a feeling feels completely accepted and seen, it usually settles down and we come to a place of peace. And so this is where, I might be able to help your audience because I have made an audio meditation that helps people to practice this what I call radical self-love, where we start to get to know and become really compassionate about all the parts that are part of us. And so I would be happy to give you the link if that would, serve your audience, where they can get that meditation for free and they can start to practice that radical self-love and realize or get a feeling for that peace that can come in when we accept how we feel.
That feels so empowering, like coming home to yourself, brick by brick.
Yes, that is really what it is about, right? I think that what we have learned often in our lives is that we have to be perfect. And often we imagine that being a perfect human being means that we don't feel anger, that we don't feel jealousy, that we don't feel confused. But that really isn't true. As human beings, we are bound to feel all feelings. And none of those feelings are harmful if we don't act on them. And what really happens when we embrace those parts of ourselves, and as you say so beautifully, come home to ourselves, then we can be at peace with all those feelings. They can all exist at the same time. They don't have to compete with each other, and we still get to choose on which feelings we want to act. And what I found in my long journey with, coming home to myself is that I used to be so afraid that these feelings would make me do things that I don't want to do. And that was my experience as well, right? Is that I would act out of jealousy, I would act out of anger. And what I have found it through my long, healing journey of over 30 years now is that if I allow myself to feel the feelings and to bear the feelings, to get really curious about them and to actually befriend them and get really close to them like a really, really good friend, is that they feel seen and understood, which is what I discovered is the only thing they want. And then they kind of settle down and they let me decide how I want to act. And so I'm not acting out of a reaction anymore. Now I get to choose, which is really, really powerful. I think this is such a, powerful way to master ourselves. It's not to make those feelings go away. That never worked. But it's to welcome the feelings, to sit with them, to be with them, to love them, which basically just means to accept that they're there and not to want to change them, to just accept them where they are or for what they are. And that always brought me and, the clients that I work with to this place where they actually now get to decide how we want to act.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, leaving a toxic relationship is hard. But what makes the healing even harder for most people?
Mm. Well, after leaving a toxic relationship, I think there are a few things that make it hard. Oftentimes, we are in a trauma bond. I don't know if you know about the trauma bond, but the trauma bond um, happens when we are in a relationship with a narcissist or with an abuser who is sometimes very nice and who's sometimes incredibly abusive. There is something that happens in the brain to where we kind of get addicted to that person through that strong negative and through that strong positive. And sometimes the positive is just a relief from the abuse. That alone can be enough to create a trauma bond. So what can make it hard is that we still feel drawn back in with the abuser. That can make healing really hard. The other thing that can make healing really hard is that oftentimes after abuse, our self-esteem is so low and we have been trained to doubt our own perceptions that we kind of lose connection with our intuition as well, right? Because so often when we said, you've done this and they deny it, we start to doubt ourselves. Well, has it really happened like that? Did I really say that? Was it really this bad? And so once we've left an abuser, we are kind of in a place where we don't know what is real or what was real. That can make it very hard to heal as well, because when we don't trust ourselves, where do we even begin with the healing journey, right? If we decide we want to ask for help, now we doubt, do we need help? Should I ask for help? Who was at fault? Was it the abuser? Was it me? That can make it very hard to heal. And of course, if we don't have support and resources, after abuse, that can make it very hard to heal as well. Because oftentimes, we need to pay for psychologists and coaches. Also, what makes it very hard is that when abuse happens, it often happens behind closed doors. And so no one on the outside saw what was going on. And so if we share our story and we're looking for support, oftentimes people won't believe us because abusers can be incredibly charming and very, very helpful to everyone in the community. But when the door closes at home, behind closed doors, when no one sees us, that's where the abuse happens. And so when we talk about someone who has been abusive, oftentimes people don't believe it. The other thing is that abusers often kind of sense when their victim is ready to leave, and they start a smear campaign to where they, will spread a false narrative to everyone in the community. Then they make you into the perpetrator. They say that they have been abused, so that by the time you share your story, no one believes you. All of these things can make it difficult to heal.
Absolutely. So, how can someone move from survival mode to true self worth and joy?
Yes. Well, I think that separating from an abuser, from a narcissist, is really important. And we need to know that our brain actually really changes while we are in a relationship with an abuser, and that it takes time to change back. So it will take about 2 or 3 months until we start to feel a little bit more peace after we have completely separated from an abuser. But that often means having no interactions with them at all, not through texting, not through phone calls, or not through seeing them. So being away is really, really important. And knowing that, that longing that we might feel to go back will also fade over time. What we need to build which has often been destroyed in a relationship with an abuser, is a supportive community. So we need to start making friends again. We need to tell our story to those who will believe us. All of that will help. We need that communal support. And then it would be really good to find someone who knows about abuse or narcissistic abuse, a professional who could help, so that we can be in a process with a trustworthy person who believes what we're saying, who can help us move forward step by step so that we don't have to walk it alone. Another thing that is what I already spoke about is that we start to find ourselves. Oftentimes, we don't really have a strong sense of self after an abusive relationship. And so we need a lot of patience. We need to know that it takes time, and we need to go on an active search to find out, who we are so we can rebuild that sense of self. What do I really like? What do I not like? What makes me feel good? What makes me feel bad? Or what makes me feel less bad? Because oftentimes after abuse, we can't really say what we like or what makes us feel good. We've kind of lost that sense for ourselves. And so a good question is to ask, what makes me feel less bad? And then, go in that direction, do those things that make us feel less bad, and move in the direction of doing those things that make us feel good. One really wonderful place to use after abuse is nature, because, of course, nature is full of beings like trees and plants and animals that are still beings and are still present with us, but are safe. So that can be a way of being in the presence of not humans, but at least some kind of beings, where we can start to feel self again, to recover back to that sense of self and feeling. And it's really important to allow ourselves to feel. That really is the connection that will bring us, back home with ourselves. And so allowing ourselves to feel, asking ourselves how we're feeling and putting a name to it. I'm really feeling disappointed. I'm really feeling sad. Oh, I'm feeling happy right now. To name those feelings, to get really curious about them, and to also get really curious about ourselves, about what we like. It's kind of like building a relationship. When we meet a friend, and we want to get to know that friend, we are there for them. We speak with them. We ask them questions. We try to find out who they are. Now we have to do that with ourselves. We have to see ourselves like this friend that we want to get to know, that we want to support through the struggle of recovery.
Mm-hmm. You're reminding us that healing isn't just possible, it can be beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. If we start to get really curious about the journey, it can be really beautiful. And yeah, that's important, to tap into that beauty and joy. And to stay curious and to know that the healing journey is not a straightforward line. Oftentimes it will feel like we are stepping, 2 steps forwards and 5 steps back, but to just keep going and to recover back to the healing journey. Oftentimes we can get really discouraged when we make a mistake or when something is not working out well, but we need to remember that if we just continue to recover back to doing the right things, recover back to loving ourselves, recover back to embracing who we are, it's about the recovery. It's not about doing the right thing at all times, but it's about recovering back to being supportive of ourselves. And every time we do that, we strengthen that pathway of being our own cheerleader, of being our own support, of looking for those people who can be cheerleaders and support for ourselves as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, what would you say to someone listening right now who feels broken or unworthy because of what they have endured?
Mm. I would say that, you have been told a lie. You have been told that lie of being unworthy, and someone has been holding up that mirror to you of where you're insufficient, unlovable, but they held up this mirror to you because then it would be way easier to manipulate you. So you need to find people who hold up that mirror of truth to you, that show that you are lovable, that you are worthy, that you are a good friend, that you have good ideas, that you are kind. Find the people that hold up that mirror to you that mirrors your worth.
That's the light right there, reminding us that we are never too far gone to come back stronger.
That is right, and this is the interesting paradox in this. After we've gone a while through this healing journey and we have recovered, we might actually be able to see that through the abuse, we have become so much stronger, so much more powerful. There is a very strange blessing in it if we choose the healing journey. Oftentimes we can then see, wow, this was really bad. I was really feeling broken, but I've come back so much stronger than I ever was because I was able to rebuild myself in a really conscious way. And now I'm really consciously choosing a life that is good for me.
Absolutely. So, Phoenix Gold is a mirror, a mentor, and a message. You are not your pain, you are your power. Whether you're rebuilding, reawakening, or just beginning to look within, know this: the journey to radical self love is the fairest, kindest thing you'll ever do. And your light, it was never lost, just waiting.